guys, what's going on? Zash here coming at you today in Raid Shadow Legends. Today we're going to go over every buff and debuff inside the game. What do they do, including all the ones that they just added kind of recently? They're always adding maybe once per quarter or so a new buff or debuff to the game. So to have kind of like a one source for all the info on every buff and debuff in the game, I think for new players and even seasoned veterans, it might help you guys out. A lot of these buffs and debuffs too, there's kind of like subtext, right? There's stuff that happens other than on face value. For example, like Perfect Veil versus Veil, True Fear versus Fear. What exactly is happening there? A lot of new players especially, and again, even some players who have more experience don't really know all the nuances of all of these abilities, so I thought I'd make a video talking about it. Hopefully it helps some of you guys out. So I'm going to pull up a champion as we talk about each of these buffs and debuff who has them as well. So we'll start with Ursica Warcaller here, and it is the Ally Protect. This is a 50% Ally Protection buff. It comes in 25 and 50%. Now, Ally Protect is one of the strongest kind of damage mitigators inside the entire game. That means the Protector, in this case Ursica, is going to be soaking up all of the damage, 50% of the damage from all other allies, right? So it comes again in 25 and 50%. Now, it will not soak up poison and HP burn damage, okay? The rest will be transferred onto the Protector, again, Ursica in this case. And then it's important to know that the defense of every single ally does matter. It's going to individually check that defense. It will be mitigated by the defense of each individual champion, and then the raw damage that they would have gotten after their defensive check will be transferred onto the Protector. So that is Ally Protect. Next is going to be block debuffs, guys. Block debuffs this one's pretty straightforward, right? It blocks debuffs for as many turns as it lasts. For example, this is for one turn on all allies. So every ally is going to be blocked or debuffs sent their way, like a decreased defense or something like that. It will not land as long as they have that debuff. It doesn't matter how much resist they do or do not have. As long as they have that block debuffs, they're going to be protected from all debuffs inside the game that do not ignore. Some debuffs cannot be resisted. Of course, those will supersede the block debuffs, but in most cases, block debuffs is going to keep you protected from those debuffs that the enemy mobs throw your way. Next up is going to be block damage. This one, again, pretty straightforward. This is going to block damage. Kyoku is a great tank. She has Ally Protect, like we just spoke about, and block damage, which is going to circumvent all damage coming their way for, in this case, 3 turns. Not too bad, right? Next up is going to be Continuous Heal, guys. Continuous Heals is actually one of the strongest heals inside the game. It's going to proc every turn. So instead of a straight up 15% heal, this is going to heal you by 15% of your total HP. So if we're putting it on allies, 15% of all of those allies' HP will be replenished every turn for as long as they have continuous heal. It comes in both 7.5 and 15%. Just make sure you can keep them alive long enough for that continuous heal to trigger. All right, guys, next up is going to be Counterattack. Counterattack, only 3 champions inside the entire game of Raid Shadow Legends have this ability: Martyr, Valkyrie, and Skull Crusher. Now, Counterattack is a great ability. It's going to cause them to, well, counterattack using their A1 ability every time they're hit. It's only going to be dealing 75% of normal damage, again, from that default skill, and it's not going to affect anything in terms of turn meter as well. It does not count as a turn. It's just simply a reactive hit from whoever, again, champion has this on your team. Only going to attack once, too, so if your champion has an A1 with 3, 4, whatever hits on it, it's only going to be attacking one time. Next up is going to be increased accuracy of 25% and 50% is the big version of this ability. This is a pretty basic one as well. It's going to increase everybody's accuracy by 50%. Now keep in mind, by 50% of their total accuracy, including all of their artifacts. That goes the same for all these buffs. Unlike aura skills, which work off of the base stats of the champion, so the speed, the base speed of the champion, increased speed aura, for example. But increased speed buff is going to be based on, or increased accuracy for this example is going to be based off the total accuracy after your Great Hall, your artifacts, and your base stats are added up. Again, that's the same for all of these buffs that we're talking about. Next up is going to be increased attack. We have Arbiter here. Increased attack is going to boost, again, like accuracy, the total stats of your champion's attack. Keep in mind that increased attack is not going to help out champions that do damage based on HP or defense. Increased crit rate, guys, is pretty straightforward as well. Increase the critical rate of the ally with the buff by that percentage. In this case, Broadmaw has a 30% increased crit rate. Just keep in mind that this is only going to last for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, so 1 out of every 3 turns, you're going to be susceptible to not getting a critical hit if you build your champions around an increased crit rate champion. That's why increased crit rate is oftentimes better as an aura skill, or just better to kind of cap off those champions that you're not able to get to 100%. Maybe your debuffers or your non-main nukers, getting a little bit extra damage out of them. Increased defense, guys, going to be a great one. This is one of the OG buffs inside the game. They added strengthen as well, which we'll talk about in just a moment, but this is a damage mitigator in the sense that it boosts your defense overall of the champion with the buff by 60% or by 30% on the small version. This is Iron Brago, one of the best increased defense champions in the game because he has it for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown when booked out. Really, really cool champion. Increased speed, guys. Very, very, very powerful buff. Again, based on the total stats, the total speed after artifacts, Great Hall, etc. Of all of your champions. I just had to find an excuse to get Scylla the Drakes in the video at least 1 time. Maybe we'll get her in 3 times. Who knows? Scylla the Drake's one of the best champions in the game.
I gotta fucking kill you myself.
All right, this is why men and women shouldn't talk.
And she has it on her passive, increased speed on a random ally for 2 turns. This is going to make your champions go faster. Speed is one of the most important stats inside the entire game, so never discount increased speed on your team. Next up, we have reflect damage, guys. Reflect damage, as you can see here on Fellhound, my favorite campaign farmer in the game. It's going to reflect, in this case, 15%. There's also a big version of this, 30%. It's going to reflect that damage right back onto the attacker, and that also counts as a hit, so it's great for Fire Knight when you're trying to chip away at that Fire Knight shield. Next up, guys, we have Revive on Death. So Revive on Death is, well, going to revive you. It's a buff, so it stays on your champions, and then when they die, it will proc, essentially bring them back to life. Now, Revive on Death will bring your champions back to life with 30% HP and a 0 turn meter. So it's not the most powerful revive ability in the game, but it's a nice kind of failsafe to have on your champions and on your team overall. Here is Skytouch Shaman, one of my favorite Revive on Death champions in the game. Next up is going to be Shield, which is also an artifact set. Now, the artifact set, the shield wearer, the person who has the shield set on, the value of the shield is going to be 18% of their max HP. Every shield is a little bit different inside the game. Here we have Metal Shaper. He is unique because he's a rare Lizardman champion, and he has a shield for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown, which makes him great against the Scarab King. Now, the shield buff is going to basically soak up. It's going to go on top of your HP, and all damage coming in, unless it ignores shield, will, be eaten up by the shield, soaked up by the shield, which will make the shield disappear, or it will just stay there, depending on how much damage is done. It's a great way to mitigate damage and keep their champions alive, preserving their HP. Next up is Unkillable, guys. We have Man-Eater, the king of the Unkillable buff inside the game. So Unkillable is pretty simple. It's not going to allow this champion to be killed, right? That's pretty straightforward there on this one.
Well, that was completely useless.
Their HP will not go below 1 HP, but they will take damage, unlike the block damage, right? So block damage, they're not going to take any damage at all. Unkillable, they will take damage all the way down to 1 HP. Again, this is a crucial buff for a lot of clan boss unkillable teams, and, well, the word is right there in the strategy. So Unkillable, definitely one of the quintessential buffs inside Raid Shadow Legends. Next up, one of my favorite buffs inside the game, it is Strengthen, guys. Strengthen is going to mitigate total damage 15 or 25% on whoever has the buff. So again, it's just going to straight up reduce the damage taken by 25%. I have Whirlwind Frost King here, who's really, really renowned because he has both a big version of Strengthen and increased defense on a 3-turn cooldown on the same ability. Next up, we have Veil and Perfect Veil, guys. So Veil is going to make your champion shrouded in a cloak, right? That's not going to allow them to be targeted by the enemy team unless your entire team is veiled up. If your entire team is veiled, they will get to choose who they want to attack. Here I have Rector Droth. She has Perfect Veil in her kit. The difference between Veil and Perfect Veil is also going to mitigate AoE damage by 15%. A regular Veil is going to be reducing AoE damage, or actually any damage taken, I stand corrected, by 7.5%. So again, to repeat that, Perfect Veil is going to be taking away damage by 15%, and Veil is going to be taking away damage by 7.5%, and again, making that champion untargetable targetable except for AoE attacks. Back to Whirlem for a second here, guys. We have increased crit damage. Increased crit damage is going to increase the critical damage of all of your allies who have the buff by 15 or 30%. So a nice damage boosting a buff in the game. So next up, guys, is going to be Stone Skin, which you can get from Stone Skin artifacts. Very, very good artifact set, especially for the arena. So it's going to remove all debuffs from the target who has Stone Skin. It's going to make them immune to all other debuffs except for bombs. When bombs will be dealing 300% increased damage to people with Stone Skin on them, to champions with Stone Skin. So again, it's going to be reducing incoming damage by 85%. Bombs will do 300%. It will remove debuffs from the target. It will make them immune to other debuffs, except for bombs. Stone Skin. Now we get into all the debuffs in the game, guys, starting with block buffs. So block buffs, pretty straightforward. When placed on an enemy, it's going to make them not be able to get buffs for as long as that debuff is on them. All those buffs will still be attempted to be placed, but they will not stick. They will be blocked or resisted by that debuff. Here we have Umbral Enchantress. I love her because she has block buffs on a 3-turn cooldown that lasts for 3 turns. 100% land rate. Basically, you can stop all buffs on all enemies as long as they don't have a cleanser on their team. Next up, we got a double whammy for you guys. Block active and block passive skills. This is going to, well, prevent the champion who has this debuff from using any of their active skills except for their A1, their first default ability. And passive skills, well, it's not going to allow them to trigger or use their passive skills as well. Now, this is not technically a debuff, but the superior version of block active skills would be put all skills on cooldown. A champion like Warlord has this ability, 100% chance win booked of putting each target skills on cooldown. This cannot be, resisted, or I should say, block debuffs will not resist this. It will just put their skills on cooldown. So this is seen as kind of the superior, the most powerful of these reduced skills or block skills abilities inside the entire game. Next up is going to be heal reduction, guys. Pretty straightforward here. It's going to be mitigating the effectiveness of any heals on the target, either cut in half by 50% or 100%, as is the case here on Skyon. Next up is Block Revive. This one you actually never really see on the target because, well, they're dead, right? It's going to prevent them from being revived. Really, really powerful ability. There's not that many Block Revivals out there inside the game, so if you have one, definitely consider building him. Great for Ice Golem. Can prevent the guards, the minions of the Ice Golem from being revived, or any boss for that matter who has minions. Also very, very good in the arena. Although going against a Lydia team, for example, she will ignore Block Revivals, so keep that in mind. Here we have an Ithwi Blood Twin, who's known for enemies killed by him on any ability. Usually it's attached to one single ability. If he kills anybody, they cannot be revived, point blank. Next up, we have bombs, guys. So Soul Drinker is a bomb champion. Bombs, really, really cool. Bombs ignore 100% of defense. 100% ignore defense. They're going straight to the HP of the champion. That's what makes bombs so effective inside this game. While not incredibly meta, at least at the time of this recording, bomb champions are really fun to mess around with. They do scale the damage based on the stat that is listed with the bomb. I think almost every single bomb, I think every bomb at the time of this recording is based on attack. So you really want to optimize the overall attack of these champions, even more so in terms of overall bomb strength than critical rate, critical damage, because the bomb value, again, is ignoring all defense. It is a debuff being placed by this champion, requires accuracy, and is going to be based all on attack. Next up, we have Decreased Accuracy, seen here on Sylar. This is an AoE attack, as we're seeing here on a 3-turn cooldown, that is going to reduce the accuracy of the opponents by 50%, which is the big version. The small version is 25%. This is going to really reduce their overall, as we talked about on the buffs, right? Their total accuracy, it's going to cut it straight up in half or by a quarter if you have the smaller version of the debuff, which is going to lead them to have a tougher time landing the debuffs on your team. Next, we have Decreased Attack, which is one of the most fundamental damage mitigating debuffs inside the game. Great for clan boss, obviously. You definitely want to have this against any area in the game where your team is dying, right? Mitigate that attack of the attacker, and it's going to make a big, big impact on the overall sustainability of your squad. Here we have Rearguard Sergeant. She has it on an AoE, 50%. There's a 25% reduce attack and a 50% reduce attack. Keep in mind, especially in the arena, that enemies that have damage based on HP or defense, this is going to have absolutely no no effect on, similar to what we talked about when we talked about increase attack buff. Next, we have decreased defense. This is War Maiden, a campaign farmable champion in stage 9. The Dreadlands, who everybody can get. She has a big version of decreased defense. It comes in 30 and 60%. That is going to do a great job both in the arena and, well, anywhere that you're attacking, right? In killing your enemies faster, right? This is the granddaddy of all damage improving debuffs to put before your nuker. Turn order really matters here, right? You want to make sure your debuffer, whoever is, in this case War Maiden, goes before your Kale, goes before whoever the nuker is on your team. That way you can take advantage of that debuff being on all the enemies. And here we have one of those other inverse debuffs. We talked about increased speed, now it's decreased speed. I told you we find a reason to include Syl the Drakes on the video again. How you doing, Syl? Let me see your face. How you doing, Syl?
Don't talk to me.
We have decreased speed on the A1 here. Decreased speed is an incredibly powerful debuff to have. Similar to increased speed being very powerful to have on your team, decreased speed very powerful in terms of sustainability and just really helping to control the match, right? If it's on a boss or the opponent, just make sure that you check into the boss you're using it on, because a lot of bosses are going to have immunity to decreased speed out there. Just a note to you guys, especially in Doom Tower. But yeah, decreased speed, very strong control ability to have. It's really going to dictate the pace overall of the match. And important to say again, I know I mentioned it before, but all of these debuffs require accuracy on your champions. Next up, we have Freeze, which is a crowd control debuff. It is going to freeze the champion. They will only receive 75% of normal damage while they're under the freeze debuff. Keep that in mind. That makes stun in a lot of cases a preferable debuff to freeze, but that's not a knock on freeze. Freeze, a very strong crowd control ability, as we mentioned. Also important to note that cooldowns do not refresh while a champion is under the freeze debuff. Next up, we have one of the most meta debuffs inside the game right now. It's HP Burn. This is Mordecai, a very good HP Burn champion, great in Spider as well. HP Burn overall as a strategy is good against almost every boss in the game, as well as the traditional Spider dungeon. What's going to happen is every time any mob alive, any enemy alive gets a start of their turn, not only them are going to take 3% damage based on their max HP, but every single enemy alive is going to be taking 3% of their damage every single time anybody gets a turn. So it's a very interesting and unique mechanic inside the game, and again, a very powerful one. So that is HP Burn. Just keep in mind, there can only be one HP Burn that ticks in the battle at one time. So it's not like you can have, 100 HP burns ticking all at the same time and stacking on top of each other. One HP burn debuff can be placed on one enemy at a time, unlike poison. Next up, we have the Hex debuff, which does, well, absolutely nothing. Hex is one of those interesting and kind of a newer debuff inside the game, relatively speaking. Hex is going to synergize with other champions on your team. So once you place Hex on an enemy, absolutely nothing is going to happen to that enemy unless you have another champion or another ability to use that synergizes specifically with the Hex debuff. Oftentimes, it's more damage to enemies under Hex, stuff like that, different synergies out there. But again, it's kind of an outside-the-box, newer debuff that's been added to the game, so Hex is definitely one that you have to do your research on. Next up is going to be Leech. Wanted to find an excuse to get Ugo in the video. There you are, Ugo.
I can't read, girls.
Ugo on our A1 has a Leech debuff. Any enemy with the Leech debuff is actually going to be healing your champion every time they're attacked. It's going to be healing by 18% of the damage inflicted. Next up, guys, another 2-for-1 here in Frozen Banshee. She has poison sensitivity. The first champion with poison sensitivity to be added to the game was a rare in Frozen Banshee, I think back in 2019, maybe 2020, perhaps. Either way, that's going to do 25% extra damage for every single poison tick active on the battlefield, on the enemy team, or on the enemy that has the poison sensitivity debuff. And then on the A1, we have poison, provided they are under poison sensitivity. Poison, the weak version, 2.5. The strong version, 5. That's going to be 5 or 2.5% of the enemy's max HP every time that they get a turn. Unlike HP Burn, it's not going to be ticking on anybody else without those debuffs. And unlike HP Burn, it can stack. For example, up to 10 poisons can fit on the clan boss. And every time the clan boss gets a turn, every single one of those poisons will do damage respective to the max HP of the clan boss or the enemy that has it. Next up is Provoke, guys, another crowd control ability. Provoke is really cool. It's basically going to cause the enemy with the Provoke debuff to only use their default skill to attack whoever placed the Provoke debuff on them. So pretty straightforward. Here we have Rockbreaker, who's one of the best actually provokers in the game, certainly for epic champions. 3-turn cooldown, 100% chance of landing a Provoke, and also places counterattack on himself, which can lead him to stacking up more defense, which is perfect for a Provoke champion. Make sure your Provoker has enough HP and defense or shield or whatever, that way they can stay alive, because they will be taking a lot of damage from all the default skills, the A1s of whoever has that Provoke debuff. Next up, guys, going to be Sleep. Sleep is seen kind of as a light version of Stun. Sleep enemies are not going to be able to take a turn if they have the Sleep debuff and their turn meter is filled, but if you do damage to a Sleep champion, it is going to wake them up and they will get right back into their turn. So it can be broken, unlike stuns, they can be woken up, right? Keep in mind, cooldowns are not refreshed while Sleep is active. Next up is widely considered to be the best of all of the crowd control debuffs out there. It's Stun. Unlike Sleep, you can hit them and they will not wake up. They're going to lose their entire turn. Cooldowns are not refreshed again when the target is under stun. And unlike Freeze, it's not going to be mitigating the damage of the enemy that has the debuff. They're going to take full damage. So Stun is going to cause them to basically totally lose their turn. Next up is going to be Weaken, guys. Weaken, whatever enemy, or I guess whatever ally, I keep saying enemy, I guess this could be on your team as well, unfortunately, is gonna, whoever has the Weaken debuff is going to be taking 15 or 25%, depending on the weak or the strong version of this debuff, more damage. Think of this as the inverse of the Strengthen debuff, right? Just sheer extra damage if they have this debuff. Here I have Ryan the Conjurer. She has a great ability that's going to remove all buffs from the enemy and also place a Weaken on them as well on a 3-turn cooldown. So next up, we have Fear in True Fear. We have Madame Ceres. She has Fear on her passive. We have True Fear on her Trick and Treats ability, her A2. So what does this do? Well, if you have either of these debuffs, Fear or True Fear, it's a 50-50, a coin flip of totally skipping and losing your turn. Now, the difference is, if you have regular Fear, it's not going to put that skill that you wanted to use. Let's say you lose a turn. Let's say Madame Ceres had Fear, right? And she went with the A2 ability, and she didn't get a turn, right? The coin flipped, and it went against her, right? So she skips her turn. If she has Fear, it's not going to be put on cooldown, right? She can still use it the next turn. If she has True Fear and it skips her turn, this skill is also going to be put on cooldown if she does not get that turn. Next up is Decreased Crit Damage, guys. This one pretty straightforward. Again, only 3 champions in the game actually have this debuff, but unfortunately, it's not a super powerful one. It is going to decrease overall their crit damage by 25%. In the case of Grush the Mangler, it can come in 15% or 25%. The reason I say it's not super powerful, especially for PvE content, is most bosses in the game actually have very low critical rates, so the chance of them actually getting a lot of crit damage is not that high. It's not as effective as, for example, decreased attack on attack-based mobs. And next up, we have Decreased Crit Rate. We have it in Dark Kale here on his passive. Decrease the crit rate of enemies under 2 or more poison debuffs by 15%. Unlike Decreased Crit Damage, this one actually is really good because, as we just mentioned, a lot of bosses only have 15% crit rate anyway. So if you're mitigating it by, well, 15 or 30%, the small and big version of this debuff, well, that will really, again, lessen the chance or totally eliminate the chance of them really getting those big monster kill shots on your allies. And note that enemy skill cooldowns will actually remain the same while under the petrification debuff. So guys, there it is. Every buff and every debuff inside the game explained, hopefully with some amount of brevity in today's video. I hope this helped some of you guys out. A lot of these were super straightforward. I totally get that. And you guys probably knew about most of them, but hopefully there were a few others that, hey, you maybe didn't know. At the end of the day, you walk away with a little bit of knowledge. That's the goal here, obviously, on every video. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way till the end of the video, and as always, take care, guys.